In the 1950s, the CIA broke the minds of children with drugs, abuse, and strange experiments to find out how they can control the minds of their enemies. They did this without the consent of the public or any of the other arms of the government, through Project MKUltra. And today, you're watching this very operation unfold in your living room. In the 1950s, the CIA was infatuated with having complete control over someone's actions, and they put their top minds to the task. But how? Over the next 70 years, this question was the basis for illegal experiments, secret operations, cover-ups, and one of the most famous TV shows in American history. Filmmaking brothers Matt and Ross Duffer launched Stranger Things in 2016, but the show originally went by a different title, Montauk. The show's script took from two of the government's most infamous conspiracies, MKUltra and the Montauk Project, thus making the cinematic masterpiece that we know and love today. Now, publicly, MKUltra doesn't exist. At least that's what they want you to believe. If the general populace understood the illegal human experiments that were being sanctioned by the CIA, there would have undoubtedly been an outcry from the people. This project needed to be secret. It needed to masquerade as nothing out of the ordinary. To achieve this massive feat, the CIA placed a chemist named Sidney Gottlieb in charge of the operation. Over the next few years, Gottlieb and his team propositioned a myriad of colleges, hospitals, and prisons. The idea was that if they ran all of their operations out of institutions covertly, no one would ever have to know what they were up to. Among the many tactics they used to hide their operations, one of the most common was to disguise it as another, less conspicuous project. In fact, many people volunteered for their cover-ups thinking they were volunteering for an innocent medical research study. So, what exactly were these unwitting volunteers getting themselves into? Well, Project MKUltra was intended to develop techniques and identify drugs that could be used for interrogations, psychological torture, and brainwashing. One of the most common studies that people unwittingly took part in was the use of LSD.
They messed up the drug.
They messed it up.
At the time, LSD was a new drug, something that most people had never heard of. But Gottlieb had heard of it, and he was convinced that its prolonged use would make someone susceptible to mind control. To test this theory, Gottlieb bought $240,000 worth of LSD, which was at the time the entire world's supply of the drug.
You ever partake in purple palm tree delight? It'll make all your troubles float away, like the seed pods of a dandelion in the wind.
The only place in the world that now had LSD was the United States of America, and the CIA was handing it out like candy at a carnival.
Come on, you piece of
At the universities and hospitals, the testing was mostly comfortable and humane, but prisons were a different story. In many of the prisons, the prisoners were being lied to about what they were getting. They were told that they were volunteering for things like schizophrenia research, not CIA mind control. According to Gottlieb and his team, in order to properly mind control someone, it takes two parts. Stephen Kinzer, a journalist who spent years investigating Gottlieb and his program, is quoted saying, Gottlieb wanted to create a way to seize control of people's minds, and he realized it was a two-part process. First, you had to blast away the existing mind. Second, you had to find a way to insert a new mind into the resulting void. So Gottlieb was intentionally trying to destroy his subjects' minds. Surely he was the first person to do this. But it turns out other countries had actually mastered this process, so Gottlieb turned to them for help. The CIA, through Gottlieb's direction, hired Japanese torture experts and Nazi scientists to advise them. You see, the Nazis were actually masters of this process. They had done extensive testing in concentration camps using a psychedelic called mescaline, as well as sarin gas to break prisoners. Gottlieb knew of the progress that they had made in the concentration camps, and thus wanted their secrets. Many experiments conducted through MKUltra resulted in death, but still, these studies went on for 20 years. Unfortunately, we will never know all of the great details of Gottlieb and his time with MKUltra, because in 1973, he burned all of his research. government leadership began shifting in the early 70s, Gottlieb was afraid that the details of his research would be discovered and those in power would find it. So to cover up all of his crimes, Gottlieb took all of the files he could find and burned them. As far as he knew, there was no evidence left, and no one would ever know what he had done. Unfortunately for him, some evidence survived. Most of what was left were expense reports and other clerical paperwork, but there was enough to piece together what we know today.
Bald Eagle. This is Bald Eagle.
Copy that. Good to hear your voice, Bald Eagle. What's your 20?
There are rumors that at the same time the CIA was experimenting with MKUltra, the US military was conducting experiments of their own. Supposedly, the secret military operation was called Montauk Project and took place at Camp Hero, Long Island, a long-abandoned World War II military base that has since been turned into a state park. But unlike the documenting of MKUltra, the Montauk Project only exists in the minds of those that claim to remember it. The alleged victims claim that in the late 70s and early 80s, the government used the base to perform horrible experiments on kidnapped boys from the surrounding New York area. A man by the name of Preston Nichols is one of the most outspoken believers of this project and a self-proclaimed victim. He wrote the book entitled The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time, which details his supposedly suppressed memories and inner workings of the Montauk Project. Preston and a group of other victims claim that they were kidnapped by the military in the early 80s and taken to Camp Hero to be experimented on. The military's goal? Time travel and psychic manipulation. But this is only the tip of the Montauk iceberg. Let's leave the 80s for a second and go back in time to the 40s. Another alleged military operation called the Philadelphia Experiment, or sometimes known as the Rainbow Project, was an apparent precursor to the Montauk Project. In 1943, a mariner named Carl M. Allen claimed to have witnessed the US Navy conducting an experiment in which they made a destroyer ship invisible using top-secret electromagnetic field technology. Sometime in the 1950s, surviving researchers from the Philadelphia experiment launched the Montauk Project to further study the psychological effects of the magnetic field, or cloaking, as they called it. All sorts of claims have surfaced through these experiments, including serums to create metahumans, time travel, and interdimensional portals, all of which sound eerily familiar if you've been following the Duffer Brothers' work. The one that rings most accurate is the alleged portal that was accidentally opened up and brought an alien-like monster from one realm to ours. It is even said that once the monster came through the portal, it started killing and devouring scientists. Doesn't that sound like that one scene where... Upon the Montauk Project being shut down, although some believe it's still going on today, those that took part in the experiments were either killed or brainwashed by their superiors. Those that survived were given new lives and identities, with no recollection of their time at the Montauk Project at all. But there are some individuals today that claim that their Montauk memories have been restored. The Montauk Project, by all appearances, doesn't exist. There are no documents or evidence pointing to it ever existing. The only link to its life are those claiming to be its participants.
It's good that I'm talking to you because it was difficult to find former Montauk boys that would talk. Did you recall any memories at all of being in any government project?
Yeah, I've never remembered any of this before 1994.
That was shortly after Preston's book came out, the first one.
Although many of these testimonies have been debunked, those who believe refuse to give up the search for evidence. It is no accident that this story mirrors that of Stranger Things. The show tells a story of a boy gone missing in a small town, a superpowered girl with very little memory of her past, and an undercover laboratory conducting shady experiments on children. Matt and Ross Duffer drew directly from those two experiments while writing the story of Stranger Things. The show is so similar to these projects that it was originally titled Montauk before eventually being renamed. Although many themes and plot points are similar to that of the two projects, don't be fooled. The Duffer Brothers are not plagiarists. The Montauk Project and MKUltra were merely a jumping off point for them to start their epic. Stranger Things does a great job highlighting the sometimes unbelievable truth that happens behind closed doors. But even their masterful writing doesn't hold a candle to the real atrocities carried out by the CIA. We will probably never know for certain the full scope and gravity of the crimes committed under the Montauk Project, or MKUltra, but their stories will have a long-lasting effect and permeate our culture forever. Play out in your own living room. Sounds kind of weird.
Oh, really? I thought it was kind of boner.
No, it is good, but it sounds like they're getting drugged in their living room. Do not put that in the outtakes.
Is it a wrap?